All right, welcome. And the agenda in chat. First topic was carried over from last week. Matt, would you like to introduce this one?
Well, sure, but well, I wish Mark or someone were here, but this is and the others who are knowledgeable are here. And this is the topic about how to, from my view, hopefully advance Jane's work to make HTTP communications in RGW robust. I'm just sort of going on a limb here. My intuition about it is that it's valuable to have those communication channels be robust, and it seems like for Mark's testing, it helps with. It does do what what Bloomberg proposed it to do. I mean, it is helpful in avoiding stalls during multi-site operation, and it probably improves performance. But there's there is at least another take on that. That's the best I can do, Casey.
Thanks. Yeah. So it has gone. Yeah, Mark did some testing, but it hasn't gotten a thorough review. Kind of one of my concerns there is just lack of good test coverage. It touches a lot of different apps, and I'm not sure that we're exercising all of them. And that's more just our fault in the state of our multi-site functional testing. But I do want to try to make progress there separately. But I guess the open question is, what do we do with this retry PR? Is Mark's workload testing good enough to merge it? Or is there something more that we can do?
My take would be Mark's work is a good start, but the points you raise are, you make a good point. If you're in support of the concept, but we want to improve the validation, I think that's sound if we can find a way to do that. If we can come up with some larger challenge workload test that and some criteria for passing.
So do we have the infrastructure to bring RGWs down and up again?
The multi-site functional tests can and do stop and start specific gateways. So yeah.
So in theory, we can write a functional test in tautology that exercises this, right?
Right. In general, tautology multi-site tests are very flaky and we see tons of failures. But if we do add new test cases, we could at least verify that they pass locally. They seem to be more reliable in local runs than tautology. So the failures of other test cases doesn't necessarily prevent us from validating that part.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be the minimum, I think, that you can validate that not just by running a complete manual setup, but you can actually validate that in the official infrastructure. And whether this test is being skipped or actually executed, depending on the flakiness of the infrastructure, then it's a different question. Well, and this is kind of to protect us against regression. But I mean, to make sure that things are working and I can with one click make sure that they're working has its value.
Well, we need that, but the points that Casey is making about the infrastructure are I think they're fundamental. We don't get reliable multi-site test runs frequently. Multi-site test failures are taken as pass. So we can't just say, well, I mean, I'm just responding to one part of your statement, but we can't. The test must pass on official infrastructure has a contradiction because infrastructure doesn't reliably execute these tests. We could make it so. I mean, I would.
I mean, this is an effort that we should make. We should invest in that whatever it takes and just do that. It's not related to a specific feature now. What I'm saying is
you're
that
right. We're going to have, but I think we're going to have to. I think we should have a separate meeting on that. But I think it's going to take. I think it's going to take bold action. I think it's going to have to take lifting these tests. I mean, my just by randomly. One possibility would be we take these tests out of Teuthology, or put them into interrelate them to Teuthology in an indirect way and put them in the same infrastructure in a way that where they run deterministically, including with chaos monkeying and other stuff to get what we otherwise want to get out of it.
I agree. I mean, this is like a bigger problem that we have regarding this specific issue. In theory, in a perfect world, we have all the infrastructure and what it takes to actually write a functional test, not like not like one huge setup that has lots of load and therefore exercise all kind of tracing. No, just really a really functional test. You take the RGW that is the zone's gateway down, and you verify that another RGW gets the requests, right?
Certainly, but all I'm saying is I'm just, I mean, maybe we're not even disagree. I'm saying is that if multi-site test failures just randomly happen, that's similarly, yeah, it's independent, but the functional test has to live in that context too. So you have to put that test into some environment that's basically not failing 85% of the time because random poop happens in the infrastructure.
Yeah. So I mean, usually when you run those, I mean,
so most of the time, almost the same tests fail every time. So we could just take them out and just have the tests that pass always, and add all the new tests to this thing, and then run them and handle the ones that fail separately.
Yeah, I think there's huge value in getting to a state where multi-site tests are green in the common case, even if we're not getting full coverage, as long as we have a strategy to follow up on the things that we know are failing.
Right.
If you guys agree that that's feasible, then yeah, certainly.
Yeah, let's just separate the tests that fail and take the ones that always run green and add all the new tests there.
Are these failures flaky or it's just failing?
So they mostly fail on Teuthology. We don't know if that's related to the machines, but yeah, they always run locally on vStat clusters. They just
so they run locally, but they always fail on Teuthology. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
In my experience, I haven't done a ton of local testing lately. They can be intermittently flaky locally also, but they're pretty much consistently failing in the Teuthology environment. Shilpa and I have been trying to narrow down exactly why that is, but we haven't been very successful. A lot of them are timeouts, which we can.
Yeah, the OSD timeouts are what we see most often, and a lot of failures generally happen after that.
Yeah, if they're consistently failing, it makes sense to kind of bifurcate them and commend them at least for Teuthology and try to fix them when at least we run the other test cases.
Yeah, we don't want to be blocking any new development because of the current failures.
Yeah, that's kind of the bigger challenge. I think we really want to scale up development around multi-site and get the new folks involved in making progress, but it's hard given the state of testing at the moment. So I do want to find a way to build around what we have and make sure that we can review and test things in a timely manner. For Jane's PR, it sounds like we want to require a functional test that at least runs some testing around the configuration with at least one OS or one RGW down.
I think we need, putting aside Teuthology, you can run the multi-site tests on your local machine using the mstart infrastructure, right? So if there's a test written that can pass that, then we have some confidence in the feature. And I think this is required for the
Mark's done more than that. He's done it and knocked RGWs out and work them back up. And
right, right. He did lots of manual work, but it's not easily reproduced.
Well, we could change that, but yes, okay, fair enough.
So I mean, even in terms of functional testing, this adds retries to a lot of different apps that that you'd have to set up reproducers for specifically. So it would be really involved to get full coverage of the PR, but at least some smoke testing that, normal bucket sync works in that configuration.
Right. So I mean, the fact that getting full coverage is difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do the test, right? So let's do that for partial coverage.
Yeah, I agree. So that'll help us verify the PR for initial merge, but if we're ignoring multi-site failures in general, it won't prevent us from breaking things. So definitely that's a separate issue that we should find a way to resolve.
Right. Like I'll try to say again what's really my view here. Let's say that I review a PR like that. The first thing that I do when I review a PR is that I clone it, I build it, and I want to test it. And if testing it means that I need to spend now 2 hours with Mark understanding how to create a huge setup, I'm just not going to do that.
No, I don't think anyone thinks that. I mean, I personally think we should take Mark's work and put it into a deployable environment. It's all Jenkins based. Stick that into the CPIA environment and start building on it. That's my proposal. I should take shots at it.
I mean, that'd be great, but again, to test that, I build that locally. I want to be able to test that locally, and we have the mechanism for that. And
what way do you have a mechanism? I mean, you can run mstart on a local machine. I don't think that tells you much.
This is
this
is how all of the multi-site functional tests are working, and they're testing the code. They're not testing load. They're not testing race conditions. But if something functionally is broken, then it would find it.
Sure. Well, so we add something to mstart, but I mean, okay, if that's sufficient, does that mean that no one's gonna, in case he's not, I bet you're not gonna object to that. I mean,
we found lots of things using this. We found lots of things doing this, especially like, okay, if there's a feature that exists for a couple of years and it fails only when you have 50 million objects in a bucket or something, then sure, that won't find it. But this is a new feature. Let's make sure that it just works. Like basic functionality that it works. You don't need 50 million objects for that.
Okay. So I mean, so someone can work on, or Jane can work on an mstart based functional test.
No, all the infrastructure for that is already. It doesn't need to do anything with mstart. Like all the multi-site tests. No, all the multi-site tests are already built on that. Okay, we have all the infrastructure for that. You just write the test in the configuration. You say how many RGWs and how many zones you have. And we have all the Python code that does everything. Okay, so you don't have to even need to know that there's an mstart hiding somewhere. Okay, all the multi-site tests are written in this way. There's a configuration file. You say how many zones, how many RGWs per zones, and so on. And you just write a functional test in Python. And this is how we do it.
Do you write something that, okay, but the nature of this test is to, I mean, just as Casey said, is to take out one or more RGWs. Is that something mstart already does?
We have like functions, Python functions that do that. Yes.
So what's the gap? I mean, for this functional layer.
Writing it, you need to write the test.
What needs to be written? We already have tests that do all kinds of things, and they all apply when one or more gateways goes down. What's new?
Yeah, so I could see two different strategies here. One would be a Python test, as Yuval's describing, just a specific test case where we take down one RGW potentially from each zone and do some workload and verify that we get the right result. a different strategy could potentially just say we run all of the multi-site tests in a configuration where we have more gateway endpoints that aren't up, that are just down for the entire test.
That's what
But
occurred to me.
overall, that
Or
probably gives us
they go
better
up and
coverage.
down. Pardon? Could you repeat the last part?
Overall, that probably gives us better coverage of all of the
Right.
different retry paths that are changing
Because
here.
the point you've made that's important. I mean, is that this cross cuts lots and lots of ops. So the most useful test of it is one that cross cuts the same way or the bigger suites do, I think.
Yeah, so the test suite itself might need some changes to support adding endpoints for gateways that aren't coming up. But as long as we have that, then it should be able to work for the mstart case and the Teuthology case.
I don't think there's real value in taking down an endpoint that you actually communicated with, and then all of a sudden you're going to get the error, and you have to handle the error, and so on and so forth. So maybe not a full coverage for all the operations, but at least to see that the code handles that.
Well, what you want to
Yeah, I
find is
guess
that the
that's
whole system responds correctly to that.
That is a good point, though. Part of this PR is adding some state to remember which gateways had errors, and eventually we should be retrying gateways that came back up.
That's right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if it's just the same set of RGWs that are out the whole time, then we don't exercise all of that.
Yep. Yeah, so I guess the best would be to have both, like to have both kind of the infrastructure or the new config saying that we're gonna have RGWs that are actually down, and then just run the entire suite, and also a very specific test that where RGWs goes up and down, and we exercise the different branches of the specific code that handles that in the PR.
It feels like a system test to me, rather than what you're describing as a.
Yeah. So I mean, in Teuthology, there's precedent for thrash suites that kind of randomly kill demons and bring them back up. So we could do something like that while either a workload is running or the functional tests are running.
But this is different. This is kind of stressing the system and see that it doesn't break. There is code that was written specifically to handle the cases where RGWs are going up and down. And if you want to make sure that this code is working properly, you actually need to do that in a very controlled manner, right? You have to take the RGW down.
Or a stochastic manner, as Chaos Monkey would say.
Yeah, but then how do you verify that you work properly? That you reconnected to the RGW that was down within the time that came up back again within the time frame that you defined, so on and so forth. I mean, this is what the code says.
So you want something very well. You could even mock that. I mean, you could mean that there's lots of ways to get at that.
The code in the PR was written, like the logic there is written exactly around those kind of conditions and
in a hypothetical universe, it would be embarrassing to me if we ran for 5 or 6 years with this patch integrated and merged and never saw a failure, but then we discovered at the end that it didn't do something that the code that code comments suggested it thought it was doing, but everything always worked. But I take the latter. I mean, both are relevant, but what we care about is the system behavior in the end.
I have tests like I have tests, for example, when I want to see that the ownership of a queue moved from one RGW to another. So I don't just bring them up and down and kind of make sure things are still working. I take an RGW down and then I verify that another RGW is sending notifications, so on. So I mean, why not write a test that tests the functionality?
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like getting full coverage of this PR would be very involved, and I'm not sure it's worth all of the effort. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think it's necessary to test that in the way that Yuval is describing every single place where this behavior
no.
could intersect an operation. But there's a combinatorial explosion. But other than that, sure, why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, let's test one very specific case, but let's exercise the different logic that we have in the PR for one case.
Okay. Jane, does that sound reasonable? Is there, do you have any idea what kind of single test case we could exercise that way?
Yeah, I think it in general it makes sense to me. I think it's just a typical replication. I mean, but in terms of the testing, actually in the system test, I've done a lot. Like I run like 4 hours of testing or something. But yeah, I don't know.
And that was bringing up and tearing down RGWs.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So I will, as an action item, I will add some comments to the PR saying what files the tests go in and try to outline a general strategy, if you'd be willing to work on that.
Who are you talking about? Me or what?
Yeah, Jane.
Oh yeah, yeah.
On your PR.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, and we can start by getting it working in local testing with MStart. And hopefully it passes in Toothology, but if not, then we'll follow up on the Toothology part separately.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so I will get something in your PR today.
Yep.
So kind of on the greater multi-site testing discussion, Shilpa, do you have any ideas on how to kind of organize the efforts that we've taken so far and suggest other steps to filter out the stuff that we know is failing and try to get tests green?
Yeah, I can work on that. I think we have numerous amounts of testing that we have performed, and more or less, I think 80% of those tests are the same tests that keep failing. So I'll work on getting them out and work on them separately. Maybe raise a tracker, just noting down the ones that fail and handle them separately.
All right, that would be great. And the other piece that Matt brought up was kind of making sure that we can automate the larger scale testing. I see that as more of part of like the Ceph release process rather than validating specific PRs, but I do want to see that.
So yeah, we do have the console to Folio machine where we always run them. So do you want me to like send an email to the dev list to introduce what we do with large scale system testing?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that anybody
email would
can
be great.
sort of
If we don't have a README somewhere, I would love to see that we can refer to. And then kind of the next piece would be finding a way to make sure that this happens for every Ceph point release so that we can validate multi-site before shipping.
Okay, yeah. We do have some documents here and there, but probably just have to put them together in a place.
Well, that sounds very helpful. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Nova.
Thanks.
All right. So yeah, Jane, sorry that it's taken so long to make progress here, but this is stuff that I really want to work past so that we can get better at it.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else here, or can we move on? Next on the agenda is from Yuval about the Lua work.
Yeah, thanks. So it really came up in something I thought is an innocent PR for exposing all HTTP headers to Lua. There was some request from the upstream community to expose a couple of headers. So I thought, well, it's kind of the same effort of exposing all of them. And there were comments mainly from Casey saying, well, that might not be a good idea, and we might want to kind of rethink how we do that. So I've looked. I'm just going to put the link in the chat. This is the documentation of all the fields that we currently expose in Lua, and when I try to look at them, it's like it's a mixture. Some of them are really related to the buckets and the objects, and I guess we can discuss them in a different time. But many of them are kind of all kind of things that are exposed from the HTTP header, and sometimes we kind of put that under like a kind of stress that this is under HTTP, and sometimes we don't. Like there's a request.content length. So this is an HTTP header. And there is a decoded URI. I mean, there are a couple of things that are actually from the HTTP header. And there's also a couple of things that are under HTTP that also expose stuff from the header, like metadata, which is kind of all user-defined headers that start with X, AMZ meta, something like that. And so overall, I would really like to kind of reorganize the whole thing in a way that makes sense. So I agree that exposing the headers as we have them is not a good idea. Couple of reasons. First of all, some of the headers are kind of important enough or would always exist, and it's easier for the user to understand that they're always there and they don't need to check whether they're null or not. For example, content length and URI, or I mean maybe a couple of other things that are always in the header. There are a couple of things that we add to the header, like HTTP versions, and because we add this code, we can probably expose them as actual fields. The names of the headers are not great because we add all kind of prefixes to them. So the user that kind of wants to write the Lua script would not even know what is the name of the header, because from their perspective, the name of the header would be the standard name in HTTP or whatever custom name that they added to the request in their application. But the fact that we added some prefix there, they would never be able to guess that, and that would make it hard for them. And also, there could be some headers that we, on purpose, we don't want to expose because they could create a security risk because of the information that is sent in them. So I kind of tend to be convinced with what Casey said, that we shouldn't just expose the headers. We should do that in kind of in a more active way. So some of the headers that we decide that are kind of important enough to be called as fields are just going to be request.http.the name or request.the name. Some of the headers that are like the one that start with the XAMZ meta, and those has to come as strings, like brackets in strings, because they're all dynamic. But even there, we'll have to kind of change the names so that they would make sense to the author of the script and not the names as we save them. And I guess there'll be a couple of headers that we're not even exposing because they can pose a security risk, or maybe later on we decide to expose them depending with the level of depending with the author of the script and what kind of permissions they have to access information. So that's the kind of overall idea. But the thing is, first of all, I would like to kind of get your feedback on that idea, and for me, more importantly, is to try to actually look at what we have there and what we're still missing, and kind of decide how the language looks like. Because the problem with changing the language too much is that it breaks existing scripts, and we would like to avoid that. So I would really appreciate if we can kind of converge on names and language that would stick around.
Well, you might look at something like Golang HTTP or other things that have canonized ways of articulating the HTTP header.
Okay.
Names, essentially, that comes from the Apache tradition and stuff, and that's has some stability. A thought that I have, too, sort of related to the privilege part, is that we might like to, we started. I think we're on a journey with the Lua integration where we started with things that were that could only be installed by an administrator, and so they were almost like program extensions.
Mm-hmm.
I think for such a thing, there's no HTTP header, for example, that in theory shouldn't be exposed, or at least probably by default. But then if we'd like to go, and I would like to go to the point where people can attach custom, some kinds of Lua scripts for custom processing that don't have privilege, and then they certainly shouldn't see some, although other than authorization or something, I'm not sure which ones they shouldn't see, but there probably are. And kind of going from there.
So the only one that I raised as an issue for privileges is the server-side encryption customer key header. This is where clients are providing key material for encryption. And we go to great lengths to avoid logging that in Ceph logs and hiding it from the administrator. It's not infallible, but that's the one that I was...
That's the only one you're thinking about?
Thinking that we should hide from Lua also. It sounds
I mean,
like it's already exposed by this metadata field, but I think that we should reconsider that.
Well, I certainly would in general. I mean, I think I can believe in a world where it ought to be possible for a site to install something that can do whatever it wants. But I don't think that's the default use of Lua.
Okay, so currently this field is, so again, I thought, because of different reasons, but also because of the naming that we have, not to expose the headers in a raw way anyways, because the names of the headers are completely they're not the names that people would expect. It's like it starts with HTTP, it has underscores instead of dashes.
Yeah.
It's like they don't make sense.
Well, hold on. Those aren't the names of headers. Those are the names of tuples in the HTTP environment crap that was written for RGW.
Right, but
names should be like the names for the most intelligible name for a programmer or a user is going to be one that looks like HTTP, where they can read an RFC and they can read a book and they can etc.
Right, and so this PR kind of naively wanted to expose the entire environment with those mangled names, and that unfortunately includes a lot of things that aren't actually HTTP headers, and so it kind of mixed everything together, and that's what I was arguing against.
I totally think that's smart.
So the existing metadata that you expose is coming from a different source that isn't mangled the same way. But yeah, in general, I do think that we should expose all headers in a uniform way, potentially excluding the server-side encryption key. And
I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's some headers that I want to expose, like not with brackets and strings inside the brackets, but like as a known non-changing fields that are always there.
There's
Like
personally, I think if it's an HTTP header, it should all be accessed from the same place. You did point out content length, but that's
Yeah.
not guaranteed either. Chunked transfer encoding won't send a content length.
I see.
Other things like decoded URI aren't.
That's true,
Sorry,
but
go ahead.
like in a Golang program, for example, or a bunch of other things, I still have a place I can point to content length. It isn't a null pointer if it didn't show up in the request. Just randomly, it's the toolkit, that has some way of communicating that's not there.
Yeah, I mean, Lua has a way to. I mean, when I say null in Lua, it's not a null pointer that you're going to crash on. I mean, Lua has like a null propagation and everything that just works. So it's like a none.
So if you wanted to, so it's purely syntactic sugar, right? I mean, you don't have to make it look like a table that you can make it look like a variable name, but it could do the same thing.
Right. Oh no. I mean, under the hood, I mean, it's not under the hood. I'll find how to do that. This is not the issue. But I do want to put the API, like the document, the Lua API or Lua binding. I want to put that and kind of stick to that, because this is what people are going to write scripts against. What I do under the hood, I mean, I can change this to whatever I want. But I want to create a language that would make sense. So if you're saying that headers are so dynamic by nature that we do want to have something like request.http.headers and then brackets, and then we'll do the demangling of the names or whatever to make sure that people put the names that make sense and we give them the value that makes sense. But if this is the approach, and we're going to do that for all the headers,
unreasonable. That's really not unreasonable. That's another way a lot of APIs expose them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I think we should have a uniform way to access all headers, even if we do expose other fields for specific things. But just thinking about Lua scripting, kind of analogous to scripting in a proxy, reading and manipulating headers is a very common thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then we can do that. So the question is, what's under the hood is the right thing that holds those headers? Because you're saying that the environment map is not. Or maybe it is, but we need to kind of more carefully find out or kind of decide what is exposed out of this map and under which names.
Yeah, currently the environment thing is a mess. All the header names are mangled. It includes other stuff. But generally, the HTTP headers start with the HTTP _ prefix.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that HTTP _ version is a special case, but other than that, I mean, I think the environment is the only thing that we have now, and so we can build an abstraction based on that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cleanup tracker issue to stop mangling names and clean up the logic around that, but that could be a separate project. But yeah, I think that for now, Lua can just build an abstraction on top of the environment that handles the names and presents it in a uniform way.
Okay.
So that if we do make changes, then that would all just stay under the hood and we wouldn't have to change how Lua exposes them to the scripts.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is again changing all the ugliness under the hood is not usually. It's kind of you just do that. It's not a big deal. Okay. So I'm good with this approach. We already have a couple of things there that seems to be mapped to one of the headers, like the content flag, like the I saw that there's like an HTTP.host and maybe some other things. that I'm not sure exactly where they're coming from. Storage class is probably also a header. So I kind of would like to clean up whatever we have so far and make sure that it makes sense. Some of them could be just syntactic sugar for accessing the headers, but maybe some of them shouldn't be there at all. There also, I don't know if it's the same thing, but there's also like request dot generic attributes and request dot environment that I think it maps to something else. I'm not sure exactly to what. The kind of sadly with the way that I did that at first, I just looked at the request state and everything I tried to expose from there. But maybe some of the things there shouldn't be exposed and are meaningless or never used.
Yeah, that's one general thing that I want to avoid is exposing all of the internals just because we can, because that makes it hard for us to change things without breaking. So
Yeah.
finding the right abstractions for Lua that will be stable, that allow us to change things without breaking scripts.
Yeah. So I mean, if it is possible, if somebody can review the current binding, at least the ones that are like the top level ones. I mean, again, we can discuss the bucket and object ones maybe in a different discussion, but the top level ones, which probably mostly maps to things that coming in the HTTP header. If we can see if they make sense, if they're even used. For example, there's something called http.domain. I never seen a value there. It's always an empty string. So I mean, I don't mind keeping those things as syntactic sugar to specific, like to important. I don't know, like http.method. I think that should be its own field. I think this is important enough.
Yeah, method, URI, those are things that are part of the HTTP request that aren't HTTP headers, and so having separate variables makes sense.
Okay, so but regarding the PR that is now under review, I'll use that to expose the headers, but not in the raw manner, but in a kind of in a way that makes more sense. Do you think we should still expose the metadata separately, or just treat those as some of the headers?
I don't think so. I did look at that, and it's not just user metadata headers, it's matching all XAMZ prefixes.
Okay.
And I mean, if we're exposing HTTP headers generally, then you can find the XAMZ meta headers within that instead of needing a separate thing. So as long as we're okay with breaking scripts that rely on metadata now with a release note saying that it changed, then I would say remove it.
Yeah. I mean, we have like a big disclaimer somewhere saying that this is experimental and fields may be removed or renamed.
Okay.
I mean, I can even maybe keep that around and just use it as syntactic sugar. So not go to the other map that holds the metadata, but go to the same map but just filter on something that starts with XMZ beta. So
sure,
that could be a compromise without breaking any existing code.
Great. And so the HTTP headers is going to point at the env map, but just demangle names. And also header names are supposed to be case insensitive, so make sure that it matches both cases.
Okay. And I'm just going to expose anything that starts with HTTP underscore. I mean, the rest of the things there, I'm just going to ignore.
Perfect. Yeah. Although you did mention that some things like remote adder and HTTP version were requested,
Yes.
and those aren't headers, so you could add separate fields for those.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I can take that from the same environment. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, I think I have lots, kind of, a much better perspective of how things should go. And I mean, it's not the end of the reorg of the dual bindings, but that's going to move us forward in many things. So that's awesome. Thanks.
All right. I'm still interested in cleaning up the header mangling stuff. I know that Jane ran into that with the Swift container metadata bug. Not sure how difficult it'll be to fix that stuff and keep backward compat, but that's still on I think it's on the backlog tracker. Any other thoughts on Lua before we move on? All right, last piece. I'm blaming this one on Matt. In a meeting this morning, he suggested deprecating LDAP as its own auth mechanism now that STS handles it better. So I'm just trying to decide what the strategy should be for announcing that and when we can safely remove it. I guess the announcement should come with a major release like Squid. And then generally we would give it 2 releases, but what do you guys think? Maybe Matt, do you know how a user that's using LDAP now would convert to STS? Is that straightforward, or?
Well, I would consider it so. I mean, it's not. You would set up a single sign-on federated with your directory, or connected or attached to your directory. So you could set it. So you could use MSA DFS, or you could use Keycloak and just attach an LDAP directly behind it. It's any LDAP environment that this interface would have supported would be supported by that. I would say you use Keycloak or RHSSO would the website is how I do it. But there are other things that can also do it and be an OIDC provider and whatever, and that would probably also work. At that point, you use STS, as documented.
Okay, so I feel like if we're gonna say that this is going away, we should have docs at least saying how to convert to the recommended configuration.
Yeah, I can maybe talk to the Harold Klein or someone and see if there's someone who was willing to bullet that out and actually run a little Keycloak or something, or maybe I can. But I assure you it's true. So we should be able to document it.
Okay. I can create a tracker issue to track that.
Okay.
Wonderful. And yeah, just while we're talking about deprecation, RGW does have a lot of baggage. Is there anything else that you guys have been wanting to see deprecated? Sometimes it's harder to remove things than it is to add them, but I do want to at least put some thought into this. Some things like potentially Barbican encryption or what is it called? OPA integration. Things like that don't seem to be that used by the community that we've just been keeping around. All right, well, if you can't think of anything now, just maybe keep it in the back of your mind. Anything else for the agenda? All right, I say we call it here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.